Afternoon. Welcome, welcome. We have folks from Glasgow, London, Portugal, Sussex, Leeds, Northampton, Cambridge, Poole, Paris. Fantastic. And we know that it is lunchtime for some of you. So if you are eating, if you have children climbing on you, do whatever you need to do. We would love you to put your cameras on and say hi. Yeah, just show up as you are. We're all here to spend the next hour together talking about confidence and motherhood. So to kick us off, Zoe and I are going to introduce ourselves. My name is Lauren Currie, and I am the founder and the CEO of UpFront. And UpFront is an organisation on a mission to change confidence for 10 million women. And we do this through our 6-week online program, which is called and we
Lauren, you're muted.
There we go. Bonds for over 3 years, and we have supported 10,000 women, and many of them have been mothers. Our programs are always free for women who are on maternity leave. And that was one of the reasons why Zoe and I decided to collaborate, to have this conversation with you today, because of course, Zoe has her new book coming out in 9 days.
Yeah, 8, I think.
8 days on this very theme. So Zoe, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, thanks, Lauren. It's so nice. This is the first thing that we've done lots of podcasts together, but this is the first thing community facing. And I love Lauren and I love UpFront. And so I'm super proud to be talking about confidence together. Yeah, so I am Zoe Blaskey. I founded Motherkind 7 years ago because I found that the content around the mother's experience of modern motherhood was severely lacking. So I decided to create it for myself. I've got a podcast called Motherkind, and this gorgeous book is out in 8 days. And this is 7 years worth of research. I'm a qualified transformational coach, so I have a thriving coaching practice as well. I've coached thousands of mothers from feeling quite overwhelmed and exhausted and stressed out and really lacking in confidence. And what I love to do is take a mother who's experiencing those things and transform her and help her to feel really confident and sure of herself and boundaried and able to say no and experience motherhood in a quite an empowered way. So that is me, and I'm super excited to be talking about confidence. I think when I think about my motherhood experience, confidence was the thing that I didn't realize would actually make or break me, and no one taught me how to develop in motherhood. So I'm really excited to share what we're going to share today.
Yes. And I think one of the pieces that we often come back to in our conversations is the societal part of this conversation.
Yeah.
Because when we talk about motherhood, I think it's really important to talk about the context, because I think so often we feel so alone in our motherhood, especially in the early days. And maybe we should share. So I have a son who is 6.5, and Zoe, you have.
I have 2 girls. One is 8, one is 4.
Yes. So we are also bringing our own experiences of motherhood to this conversation. I immigrated to Sweden when my son was 2, so lack of village and lack of support system has been a big theme in my parenting journey. And I think the context of the bias and prejudice that mothers do face, and the fact that we are living in a world where 90% of people have a negativity bias towards women, that's a statistic from the UN, is one that I always want to start these conversations with, to really, really, like, if you take one thing away from this conversation, it's none of this is your fault. This is a systemic problem because mothers are overlooked, made to feel invisible, ignored, excluded, and it is a real problem. And I know Zoe's book is full of statistics from lots of different areas of our life that back that up. I guess that's the first thing that I'd like to ask you about, Zoe, like the societal piece. Like, talk to me about the societal pressure that
So
mothers.
it's really important to me whenever I talk about, like you were saying, Lauren, whenever I talk about anything to do with motherhood, how I try and differentiate what I teach is that I always talk to those societal impacts first, because what I found is that if we don't know, I call it like the cultural soup. If we don't know the cultural soup that we're swimming in, what women tend to do is blame ourselves. We tend to blame ourselves. And so I think it's super important to understand what is going on. So let me just give you a couple of the pointers that I think make up this kind of perfect storm that we're in of modern motherhood. And please do, in the chat, add in which of these is resonating the most, or some that you're experiencing that I might have missed. So I think the first one, and you alluded to it, Lauren, and I'm the same actually. I have no family nearby. And I think the first thing to remember is that we're actually designed to raise our children in community. So Dr. Gabor Mate, he is a mentor of mine. He's in the book a lot, and I've done some podcasts with him. He really opened my eyes to this, that our babies and our biology is designed to raise children in community. So there's an amazing word that I love called alloparent. Does anyone know that word? Tell me in the chat if you know it. What it means is that we are meant to raise our children with around 8 alloparents, which are incredibly involved other caregivers. Our nervous systems actually aren't designed to be one-on-one with young children all day long. They're not designed to be. It is too flooding for our nervous system. So the average mother would have had 8 alloparents around her. So if you are finding it hard because you are on your own with your, baby or your young child for hours and hours and hours on end, that's not because you're failing. It's not because you're a bad mom or you need more confidence. It's because we're not designed to raise our children that way. And of course, there are things we can do. We don't just throw our hands in the air and say, oh, well, we're all screwed. There's absolutely things we can do, but we have to understand this context. Emily says, no wonder I feel maxed out. Absolutely. Absolutely. There's another incredible statistic that I love, which is that actually being alone and responsible for young children is more stressful than 98% of jobs. The 2% that it's not more stressful than are like A&E doctors, people on the front line. Because when you look at the nature of stressful activities, you are interrupted a lot, you care a lot, there's a high level of cortisol, and the stakes are really high. And you just know when we're looking after children, all of those are absolutely true, and it makes it really stressful. So we have to understand it's not us, we're not failing. It is really stressful. We're also living in this time where we have more parenting information than ever before. Like if you just look one generation ahead of us, they just didn't have access to the billions upon billions of parenting accounts, advice, books. It has exploded. And on one hand, I think that's a really positive thing. On the other hand, what's happened at exactly the same time is support has fallen away. So we're in this kind of absolute perfect storm when we know so much about brain development, we know about attuning to emotions, we know about the importance of the first 5 years, but most of us have not got the support around us to be able to put those things in place. So we just feel like we're failing. One more I'm going to tell you about, which I think is really, really, really important, is that at this point in history, we have more mothers in paid work than at any other time. That is an incredible thing. But what has happened at the same time is that behind closed doors, our domestic, our equitable systems, and our government support systems haven't caught up to that fact. So we are the generation who are doing more paid work than at any other point, and still doing the majority of the default parenting, the childcare, and the domestic work at home. So all of this to say, I know this feels a bit doom and gloom. All of this to say, if you feel like you're failing and you can't cope, it is not you. You are not personally failing. we are operating in a system which is incredibly challenging for mothers right now. Okay, you have to get that, because when I really started to understand this, and it's all in the book, as Lauren says, there's just tons of statistics and everything backing it up. But what I really try to do in my work with Motherkind is give you that so that you can have compassion for yourself. It's not me, I'm not failing. And I give you some tools. Because while people like Lauren and I and lots of amazing organizations are working to change things at a societal level, you probably need some help like this week or this afternoon. So we also are going to give you tools today that are going to help you within that context. So tell me anything that I've missed that you think, actually, Zoe, you've really missed this pressure. Lauren, anything that I've missed from your perspective would be really good to hear in the chat. And then I'm going to ask Lauren about her tips on confidence. So tell us, Lauren, about what some of the other confidence myths to segue into that piece of the workshop.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pattern that I can see in the chat is emotion and tears and guilt and probably sadness and anger. Like, it is very difficult to accept that this is our reality, and that even though we can understand when we hear these stories that it's nothing that we have done to cause that, it's still we are having to live with the consequences every day, and our babies and our children are having to live with those consequences. And I think if you're feeling kind of overwhelmed with that, I would urge you, first of all, just let it out. Like, don't, turn your camera off, do what you need to do. But know that we're all in this together. And I think that's why up front and the bonds that we create, community is so central to that, because trying to build up your confidence on your own when you're in a state of exhaustion, fatigue, social isolation, frustration, anger is pretty much impossible. Like, you can't be your most confident self when you're sleep deprived. Like, those two things don't match. I think it's like I want to wave a magic wand and throw a big bucket of self-compassion at us all, which I know is so difficult because we've all been conditioned since we were very, very young girls to put other people's needs before ourselves. And that's why this stuff's hard. Like, it's not hard because you didn't study hard enough, or you didn't do yoga, or you didn't eat enough almonds, or you didn't read the right book. Like, it's hard because we have 20, 30, 40, 50 years, whatever age you are, of conditioning to unlearn that we are important and that we do matter and that our needs do come first, and that actually we are everything that our children and our babies need, just exactly as we are. And I think when we really think about how confidence plays into that, I mean, the first thing, as I said, is really letting yourself off the hook, because it's really hard to be confident when you're fucked, for lack of a better word. Like, that's how I felt for a lot of the first few years of my son's life. But I think the first myth that I always go to with confidence is this idea that we're born with it. And we've all met those mums at the NCT class at the school gate, the mums who just seem to be taking it all in their strides, and they are confident in all areas of their parenting. And it's like, well, she's figured this out and I've not. And so we berate ourselves, we compare ourselves. And the truth is, nobody's born with confidence. In fact, the opposite is true. Confidence is a muscle that you build the same way you learn to breastfeed, the same way you learn to change nappies, the same way you learn to code or play basketball. You can learn confidence. It's a muscle that we learn. And the women who you might look to, the mothers who seem to have it all together, you're only getting to see like one line of her whole chapter. You're probably only getting to see the show reels or the parts that she feels she can share. And this is especially true on the internet. The internet is full of perfect mums, making us feel like we're doing it wrong. So know that confidence isn't something you're born with, it's something that you learn. I think the second thing is that we believe that confidence is something that you get. It's a destination. So you're like, okay, I'm going to do upfront Bond course. I'm going to read Zoe's book, do some coaching with it. Then I'll get confidence, and then I'll do this, this, and this. Confidence is not a destination. You don't have it one day, wake up and you have it. It's something that ebbs and flows. It's something that changes depending on the context, depending on the mood you're in, depending on the environment you're in, depending on what's happening in your life. And often when we become mothers, our confidence is knocked. That's a really common thing because we're doing something incredibly difficult that we've never done before, because we often lose contact with our friends and family, because our bodies change shape, because like there's all these very practical, very valid reasons why our confidence is going to be shaken. But that doesn't mean that you can't get it back. It's still there. You can get it back. And that's the thing I want you to take away from this. Like, it's, if you're feeling that your confidence has hit rock bottom and you're like, well, this, this is just me now, this is my life, the opposite is true. You're in an ebb, and you will rise again. It will rise again. And I think the third myth around confidence is that if we want to teach our children confidence, then we have to, buy them the right books and show them the right TV shows and say the right things to them in those kind of crucial moments. The real truth is the way that we raise confident children is by being confident ourselves. And I think that's quite scary of an idea when you really think about that, but it's also very freeing and liberating, because you can do all the things, the best books, the best resources, the best teachers, the best sports games, whatever it is. But if you are walking through your day hating on yourself, not prioritizing your needs, deleting photographs of you when your friend takes one, not going to the toilet when you need the toilet, like, your children see all this. And this is a time where you can go, oh my God, oh shit, oh my God, they're seeing all that. And you also start to beat yourself up. That's not what this is. This is about knowledge, being together, and self-compassion. Okay, we're not going to be able to fix all this in a 60-minute conversation, but we want to plant the seeds, and we want to start conversations, start new behavior patterns, start to create those new neural pathways. So the three myths: you are not born with confidence. It's something you learn. It's not a destination. It's not an end point. And if you find yourself going through phases where your confidence feels low, it will come back. You will build it up back. And the third is, if we want to raise confident children, we have to be confident ourselves. And that's the question that I want to ask you next, Zoe.
Yeah.
About raising confident children. I would love, well, maybe any reflections on what I just shared. Let me check back on the chat.
I've been in the chat as well. Just some amazing insights and reflections in the chat, and lots of, like you were saying, Lauren, this is hard. Like, this is a hard conversation to have. So I just really honor anyone who is, showing up in the chat, sharing how you feel. Thank you. I think when I reflect on my journey with confidence, I absolutely resonate with what Lauren was just saying about, I thought that some people were born confident, and unlucky for people like me who weren't. I was deeply unconfident. Even at the start of Motherkind, I did not understand what real confidence was. I thought real confidence wore a power suit and was the loudest in the room and was extroverted. Well, I am a real introvert. So I never resonated with that idea of confidence. I now know that real confidence is the ability to be true to myself in any situation. Real confidence is being able to say no, despite that it might upset my in-laws or some of my family. real confidence is when I say, I'm not going to put that podcast out because it's not good enough to a guest. Like, can you imagine how awkward that conversation is? That is what real confidence is to me these days. And I know that Lauren agrees with that definition. It's about, can I be true to myself and my values, even in this world, as we were saying, that's quite unkind. I think the other thing that really, really has switched for me, and this is so pertinent to motherhood, is that we build our confidence outside our comfort zone. And so actually, if we think about motherhood, every single hour, I am shoved outside my comfort zone because I'm dealing with things that I might have never dealt with. And every stage and every phase of motherhood, you know, whether it's going back to work, changing our work plans, having another child, children growing up, you know, every single age, almost every week, we are dealing with something that we've never dealt with before. On one hand, that's really hard. On the other hand, that gives us an opportunity to grow in confidence because we are in what me as a coach calls that stretch zone, where we're like, oh, this feels really new and different. And that is an opportunity to think, I can handle this. And actually, I'm going to allow myself to just see if I can handle this as best I can. And that is real confidence. I think confidence is just being willing to keep showing up time and time and time again. So those are my reflections on what Lauren has said and on my confidence journey. In terms of raising confident children, I have 2 girls. So I think about this all the time. Like, what is that intersection between femininity and confidence? What's confidence? What's arrogance? And what I know for sure is that 80% of parenting is modeling, as Lauren said. So I do my best to model true confidence to my children, which is I really want them to see me being true to myself. I often will talk really out loud about doing new things that I'm scared of. Tomorrow morning, I'm going on a massive radio show and I'm talking to my girls about it to promote the book. I'm saying to them, I feel really nervous. I've never done this before, but I'm going to try my best. And the reason that I have the confidence to take those opportunities is because I've developed this self-compassion and self-kindness that Lauren was talking about. When we're really hard on ourselves, it's really hard to ask ourselves to do new things because there's a part of us that knows if we fail or mess it up, we're going to come down on ourselves like a ton of bricks. I know tomorrow, if I mess it up, I'm going to be kind to myself about that. That gives me the courage to go for it, even though I'm really nervous. So I think confidence is often, we think of it as there's no fear involved. There's always fear involved. Always, 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 always. It's when we need courage. So I often think about, you know, confidence is courage that's taken its first steps. We're doing it. Yeah, Lauren, we're doing it despite the fear. That is your stretch zone. So the other things that I think about when I think about raising confident children is that actually children are born confident. You've never seen a child or a baby think, I'm not going to cry because I don't want to upset my parents ever. Or I feel really hungry, but I'm not gonna cry for milk because it looks like everyone's busy around me. So children are born confident. They have an innate ability to ask for their needs to be met. We know this, especially with toddlers, like, mummy, watch, mummy, look at me, tugging. They have an innate ability and quite a high esteem to ask for those needs to be met. What happens over the years and the decades, and what's happened to many of us sat on this call now, is that confidence gets chipped away at. So I think that's the first thing to remember, is that your children already have that innate ability to be true to themselves in any situation. Sometimes I squirm, you know, when a mum at the school gates will say to my 8-year-old, do you want to come for a play date? And she'll go, no, thank you. And I'm like, everything in me wants to say, well, no, I'm sure she will, really. That is confidence. She's not worried. She's saying on the inside what she feels on the outside. What I have to continually do is not project my people pleasing onto her confidence that she already has. So if you might be thinking, well, my child's really shy, shyness is not the same as confidence. In fact, if you think about what shyness is actually being true to yourself. It's actually, you can be very shy and confident. Does this make sense? My little girl is like this. So she'll walk into a party sometimes and cling to me. There's no part of her that's worrying about how that looks to others. She's being really true to herself, which I think is confidence. So I think the number one thing when we think about raising confident children is not to put our fears onto them. So actually raising confident children is really about modeling and being aware of our own tendencies. Lauren, what do you agree with, disagree with, build on? I'll get in the chat and see what everyone's saying.
Yeah, I think so. My son is very introvert. So I definitely agree with you on the kind of shyness piece. And there's a wee story I want to share about that. But I can see a lot in the chat about the pressure and how scary it feels to think that how you show up is the thing that's going to have the biggest influence on your children. And that can feel like a huge pressure and a huge stress. So I want to introduce an idea, a tool that we've been using in our house since my son was 2. And it is an idea that I learned from the comedian called Robert Webb and his book, How Not to Be a Boy, which is a great book. He mentions in a few sentences that when he was trying to teach his young daughters about the patriarchy, I think the daughter was 6 and she couldn't quite say patriarchy and it sounded like she was saying trick. And he said, well, you're right, it is a trick. And it's a trick that tricks people into thinking that there's certain rules for boys and certain rules for girls. And it's the trick that makes mummies get paid less when they go to work and it makes daddies sad. And I just became obsessed with this idea of what if we can teach our children from that young an age what the trick is. It's essentially language to introduce them to the patriarchy. And so we started using it in our house, and it has had such a big impact on our core family, our extended family, our friends, that we have now written a children's book that will be published hopefully at the start of next year. And the way that I talk to my son about, so he'll say to me, why do you put makeup on when you have a call and daddy doesn't? And I can say, well, the trick makes me feel like I have to put makeup on. And it, it doesn't tell daddy that he has to put makeup on. My son's got very long blonde curly hair, so he's often mistaken for a girl. And rather than that being a source of shame for him, when it happens, we can say, oh, that waiter was tricked. He thought you were a girl because you had long hair. He doesn't know that boys can have long hair too. And it works. I mean, we started talking to him about this before he could talk. So I think you can talk to your children about, it's hard for me to want to wear a bikini at the beach because the trick makes me feel like I have to be really thin. That's a conversation that you can have. Like, it's hard for me to tell Granny that she can't come over because the trick makes me feel like I have to say yes to everybody. It's a way to, it's not about being perfect. I think it's about letting them into, you are also on a learning journey. You're also going to making mistakes. You're also figuring things out and experimenting as you go. So use the trick. And if you're interested, I think Kim's put the link in the chat. So we're on Instagram, and it's a project in its early phases, but I'm excited about it. So the piece about shyness is really big for me because I'm an extrovert, and I've had a really steep learning curve of being an extroverted parent and having an introverted child. And I think similar to what Zoe described of that, is kind of your wee girl clinging on to you at the party. We can think that confidence looks like saying yes, jumping in, immediately joining in. Who wants a shot? Me. Who's gonna go first? Me. Who wants to pick the team? They're right in there. They're confident. They're using their voice. It's like, yes, that's what confidence looks like. And it does for some kids, not for mine. nowhere near. My kid, no chance. And it sounds like not for Zoe's wee girl either. And I think, and I heard Dr. Becky from the Good Institute talking about this. It's like, if you fast forward 16 years and the teenagers at the skate park outside the local pub are all jumping in, going first, yes, let's do it, let's do it. And my son doesn't join in, I'm going to say to him, you really took your time. And so I'm distracted by my cat trying to escape. Don't know if you can hear him meowing. He's not going to jump in and do the thing. He's going to take some time. He's going to assess the situation, and he's going to decide, you know what, I don't want to do that. That doesn't feel safe, or it doesn't feel good. And in that moment, we would say, that was so confident of you to do that. And it's the same behavior. Because a kid that's being hesitant is actually just trusting themselves. They're trusting themselves to be like, I want to be here. I don't want to be over there. This is what feels good. That doesn't feel good. And I think and also being careful not to label. And this is something that I've had to talk to my mum and dad about, because I can hear that, oh, he's really shy. He's such a shy boy. And it's like, shyness is not an inherent thing. Shyness is a behavior. We all feel shy. If we all had to go on a first date tomorrow, we would feel shy. If we all had to go to sing karaoke, we would feel shy. Doesn't mean we're a shy person. It means in that moment, we are having a feeling of shyness. So it's making sure your children don't get labeled with, same as like for me, I grew up with, oh, she's so loud, she loves being center of attention, she never shuts up. That did not help me. I was given this label that I almost then felt I had to match that. Labels are never good, any label. It just so happens we live in a world that is biased towards extroverts. So if you're really loud and jumping up and down and first to say yes, it's like, oh, well done, they're confident. That's great. That's just not always the case. Sometimes the quietest person in the room is the most confident. So I think it's really understanding what shyness is. And then the second thing, when I think about confidence in my son, is this idea of always telling him that I believe him. So when he comes home to me and says, I'm really sad, I lost the race today. I thought I was the fastest at school and I'm not. I lost the race, and he's upset. My instinct is to be like, no, you're not. You're really fast. You beat Alex last week and you beat me the week before, and you're super fast. Don't be sad. Actually, what I'm saying to him doing that is, I don't believe you. I don't believe that you're sad. Whereas when he comes to me and says, I'm sad I lost the race, I can say, yeah, I believe you. I believe you're sad. That sounds sad. And it's that moment of, it's validating their feelings leads to them trusting their feelings. And that's what confidence is. Trusting yourself, trusting your feelings, trusting yourself to make decisions, trusting yourself to do the right thing for you. And we can do that simply by turning up in those moments and saying, I believe you. I believe you is a really, really powerful phrase. Think about the last conversation you had with a friend where you were really upset about something. And imagine them saying to you, looking in your eyes and saying to you with a really tender voice, I believe you. Like it's a very validating thing. And I think it boosts confidence rather than this kind of instinct to build up and like hype up and cheerlead, which can actually reduce confidence in those moments. So for me, it's about the trick. The trick is a big part of our everyday language. Every movie we watch, we have a trick debrief afterwards. Where did we see the trick? Where was the trick sneaking up on us? And now my son catches me out. He sees it in places that I don't, and this is my job, and he's only 6. understanding that shyness is a feeling, not a trait, and actually celebrating that. You know, it's not about trying to teach them how to be extroverts. And the phrase, I believe you. Zoe, do you want to, any reflections you want to share on that?
I love the trick. I don't think I've heard you talk about that before. I absolutely love it. I'm going to start using that. I think quite a lot of people in the chat saying, sadly, often our educational institutes haven't caught up with real confidence is.
Mm-hmm.
There's a book called Quiet by Susan Cain, which it's old now, but it's absolutely phenomenal. And interestingly, everyone in government, I think, had to read that about 2 decades ago. But clearly that has not filtered down into, you know, nursery staff and teachers, where we do have this very old-fashioned idea of what confidence is. So if you're in a situation where you're getting that, I think part of our confidence as mothers is to have that conversation. We don't need to do it defensively or from a place of self-righteousness. We can just explain our viewpoint. Someone was sharing earlier on about how nursery and these caregivers, they are our modern day allo parents. So when I put my children into their nurseries, or every time they get a new teacher, I always have like a quick email or a quick meeting with them, and I share some of our values at home, because in some ways they are a little bit different. I mean, not wild, but just, you know, I always validate her feelings. If she's upset, please don't tell her to cheer up or move her out of it. Like, I really teach at home, like Lauren was saying, that your feelings are all welcome. I'd really appreciate it if you could do the same. Most nursery staff are incredibly receptive to these sorts of things, not always, but often. So I would encourage you to be advocates for your children in those childcare settings. Like, we can absolutely educate our educators. They're at the brim. Like, they don't have time always to read the books and listen to the podcast, but some of us might. So I think that's what I would say to those to those comments. It's really powerful to do that for our children and ourselves. Like, it develops that confidence muscle in us, doesn't it? That we can have those conversations. I wanted to share, we've got 20 minutes left. We do want 10 minutes for questions, because Lauren and I both love the questions. Often that is where some of the most rich content comes through. So we are definitely going to earmark time for questions. But in the last 10 minutes, I wanted to share some journaling prompts. So in the book, I worked really hard to weave together 7 years worth of experts like Dr. Becky, who Lauren just mentioned. Lauren is in the book. Gabor Mate's in the book. Glennon Doyle's in the book. Like, unbelievable people. I've worked really hard to condense their expertise on modern motherhood. I also have weaved in my journey over the past 7 years and how I've completely transformed as a person and as a mother. And there's loads of my client stories. So I've coached thousands of mothers, and some of the most unbelievable transformational stories I've put in the book. So that's like the bones of the book, of how it works. And there's 12 chapters in there. And I start at matrescence, which a lot of you were talking to about. I feel so different. That is matrescence. And I start there. And then I end building you up. And there's a whole chapter on confidence, which is chapter 10. And then I talk about your dreams in motherhood and leaning into your dreams to finish it. But one of the things I'm also really proud of in the book is that on every page, there's a Motherkind moment, which is like a little affirmation that you can just grab. Like, right now, you could grab it and you could just say it to yourself over and over and over again, and it would absolutely change the trajectory of your afternoon or your day. There's also toolkits where I give things that you can practically do, like some of the things that we've been talking on the call today. And there's these things called Motherkind musings, which are journaling prompts. I call them musings because not everyone loves journaling, right? Some people just want to muse on the question as they're pushing the buggy or on the commute to work. And I wanted to share some of those with you now that are in the confidence chapter, because what I know to be true is that we get insights and self-awareness through self-reflection. I think that's actually the only way that we can get that, is that when we can create a little bit of space from the day-to-day hamster wheel and ask ourselves a question like, what does confidence mean to me? That is how we get the sort of wisdom that we then get to pass on to our children. And the reason Lauren and I have all these ideas is because we've just done a lot of self-reflection over the years. That's how you get to some of these insights. So I want to share those with you now. If anyone wants to have a reflect on them and answer them in the chat, that would be super powerful. Equally, copy these, take them away with you. Maybe Lauren will also pop them in the follow-up email that you'll get. So the first question is, what would having more confidence mean to me? What would it mean to you to have more confidence? What would you be able to do that you currently can't do? Because the only reason that we ever lean into developing a new skill is because we have a why. We need to have our why. Like, why is confidence important to you? How would life be different? How would life be different with your children? How would life be different with your partner? How would it be different at work? Like, when you imagine a future self where you feel true to yourself, which remember is that real definition of confidence, what would change? What different actions would you take? And I think part of getting out of your comfort zone and into that stretch zone is next time you're faced with something, you'll be faced with something this afternoon, because we all are. You can think, if I was really confident, what would I do? Would I speak up about that thing that I just saw that I feel really uncomfortable about? Would I actually say something to the teacher as I picked them up and I got another report of shyness? Would I say to my partner, actually, no, you need to do this for me tonight? Would I advocate for myself a bit better? What different actions would you take? Because I think sometimes we can step into that acting as if part. We don't always have to wait until we feel truly confident to start acting truly confident. And that is something that has really, really helped me in that stretch zone that I talked about. What do I need to unlearn about confidence? Lauren has talked amazingly to so many of those myths. I think I had to unlearn that you were born with it. I had to unlearn that it wore a power suit and it was loud. I had to unlearn that I could be an introvert and incredibly confident. I feel more confident sat here than I've ever felt in my life, and I'm incredibly introverted. They absolutely can sit together. So what do you need to unlearn about confidence? How was confidence modeled in your home growing up? How is it talked about? How are women talked about? You know, so much of, we think that we're kind of these rational humans with these smart brains, but actually so much of our behavior comes from these hidden beliefs. About 90% of our behavior is driven from subconscious beliefs, which we often absorb when we're younger. So if we were in environments, which often lots of us were growing up in the 80s and 90s, where there was a lot of the trick going on, we will have learned some really unhelpful beliefs about mothers and confidence and women and everything that we can think of. And so those will be driving your behavior without you even realizing it. It's like you have a GPS that you don't even remember programming, but it's directing your life. So we have to make the invisible visible. So that's a super powerful question. If you only did one, probably do that one. What do I need to unlearn about confidence? How has my confidence grown in motherhood? So many mothers that I speak to tell me, I can't believe how much more confident I've got. And it might be in little ways, like I've never been able to stand up to my parents before, and I'm doing it. I've never been able to ask for my needs to be met before, and I'm doing it. So we won't see our progress unless we look for it, because of negativity bias, which is another trick, actually an internal trick in our brain. It forces us to focus on the negative. That's what negativity bias is. We focus 5 times more on the negative than the positive. It makes sense because when we were back, you know, on the savannah, we have to constantly be scanning for what could go wrong. But what that means today is that if you don't intentionally focus on how am I more confident, how have I grown, you just won't notice it. But you will notice all the ways in which your confidence is lacked, in which you're getting it wrong. That's not the reality. That is this negativity bias at play. So have a think for yourself. How has my confidence grown? And what new skills have I developed in motherhood? I am so passionate about this. Employers are so lucky to have a mother. The skills that I have learned in motherhood: problem solving, time efficiency, thinking on my feet, spontaneity, learning new skills, are actually mind blowing. And I'm just going to finish with this because I want Lauren to share before we get to questions. PwC, which is a huge consultancy firm, studied every type of employee, full-time, part-time, everything you can imagine. And what they found, because they wanted to know who's the most efficient. I mean, it's so capital, isn't it? Capitalist, who's the most efficient? But what they found was that part-time women were the most efficient workers on the planet. And that completely unsurprises all of us, because mothers in the workplace are unbelievably efficient. And I think when we can start to stand in that power, how lucky an employer is to have us, it does really help us to think about what new skills have I developed and how can I bring those into the workplace and use this to feel more confident and less apologetic. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes before we get to questions. Lauren, tell us about Bond 8 and how unbelievable it is that it's free for anyone on maternity leave.
Yeah, and I love those journal questions. Quite a few of those prompts are what we spend the first module of the Bond program. So particularly your relationship with confidence in your childhood and over your, over your life. Like, what are the things you've been taught to believe about confidence? And so much of the work we do in the Bond is about unlearning. Rather than learning new things, you're unlearning all the bullshit that we've been taught to absorb, to make space for these new behaviors, new patterns. And I just want to briefly explain how the program works. So it lasts 6 weeks and it's entirely online. We have had over 10,000 women from 24 time zones go through the program in the last 3 years. It is transformative. You will meet women in this program that will become friends. They will become collaborators. They will become people that love your children. I will say you're going to meet at least one person who's still going to be in your life in years to come.
Oh.
And it costs £590. We have payment plans and it is totally free if you're on maternity leave. Always has been, always will be. And for those of you who buy a ticket, you're already making it accessible for a woman on maternity leave. And the reason it's free for women on maternity leave is all the reasons that we've talked about in this call. Because sometimes, no matter how hard you work, how determined you are, the odds are stacked against you. And the odds are stacked against mothers. And that's why we've designed the program that way. So there's pre-recorded course, which is split into 4 chapters. So the first chapter is all about mindset. So we do a lot of work around growth mindset, our relationship with people pleasing, our comfort with being seen as difficult, our relationship with vulnerability. The second chapter is about visibility, culture, and work. So this is when we're looking beyond ourselves to our families, our teams, our organizations, our communities. Because up front, it's not just about you becoming confident, it's about what you then do with that confidence to cultivate it in the women around you. The third chapter is the physicality of confidence. So that's when we get into things like voice and breath and posture, how you move through the world. Actually, moving through the world with a really big bump is a brilliant exercise in confidence. If any of you here are pregnant, I want you to practice just moving through the world, going on a bus, opening the doors to the cafe and not saying sorry. You're physically taking up more space than you feel comfortable with. The people around you are aware of how much space you're taking up and you're going to own that space and not say sorry. And then send me a message on Instagram, tell me what happens because it's always great. And then the last chapter is about doing the thing. It's the practicalities of becoming more visible online, building your reputation, being on a panel, speaking in public, building the business, getting the promotion, changing, often things change at home, whatever that looks like for you, it gets very practical. So that's the pre-recorded stuff. And you can watch that whenever you want, in the middle of the night when you're breastfeeding, on your commute, totally self-led. The second piece is weekly live sessions, which are a bit like this. So they're like mini TED Talks, high energy, educational, and they're delivered by a host of different experts. And the third piece is the community. And the community is a really special part of the bond because the relationships that you will build there will last. And you will, it's a bit like it's happened in the chat now in a tiny bubble. It's like imagine having that in your pocket 24 hours a day for 6 weeks. And then afterwards, we have another space where you can join with the other bond alumni from all over the world. So if you're employed, your employer should pay for your ticket. So you can send me a message, get in touch with Shakira and our team. We can help you pitch it to your organization. If you're on maternity leave, it's free. So we would love to welcome you. The curriculum's on our website, testimonials are on our website. It will transform your confidence. It will change how you're showing up for your children, and you will stop apologizing, and you will not feel guilt for taking up the space that you take up in the world. There's a long, long list of incredible benefits and stories that I can tell you, but I'll let you go and check them out on the website. But I think that the thing that I'm just keep thinking about is this piece about, what happens when they go to school and the good work's undone, or we're trying so hard not to beat ourselves up about this. And I think when you get in that space, it can all feel so out of our control. It's like I can't change the school system. I can't change these really big institutions. But what you can change, what you have 100% power over, is your self-compassion, how often you ask for help and then take and receive the help, how kind you are to yourself while you're trying to figure that stuff out. So I think that's where to focus your attention and try not to get overwhelmed with the scale of the other things in the picture that we can't control. So we're at front.com. We would love you to join Bondi. Do follow me and Zoe on Instagram. We're always talking about these things all day, every day. And I think we're going to stop now for questions.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions,